Hello and welcome to Get With The Program Radio Show. I'm your host, Gary Jones. Get With The Program Radio Show is a multicultural, informative, relevant, and entertaining one-hour weekly show offering you a combination of diverse interviews with questions and comments. And as always, we will act as a positive source of information. Now listen, if you want to be a guest on the show, shoot me an email, garyjones16@yahoo.com. You never know, you may have a conversation that we would love to talk about. Or go to the website, www.getwiththeprogram.biz. Now listen, today we're going to be joined in the studio with Secretary of State, actually North Carolina Secretary of State, Elaine Marshall. Now Elaine Marshall, she is the first woman to be elected to that office and the first woman elected to a statewide executive office in North Carolina. Secretary Marshall has been very active in many civic groups in the areas of child welfare, women's issues, and agriculture and small-town economic development. Since becoming Secretary of State, she has received numerous state and national awards for leadership in technology, government innovation, and women's leadership. Once again, it is a pleasure to have her here. Also, I'll have with me today is Mr. Steve Rao. Steve Rao is a regular commentary guest on Get With The Program Radio Show. It is a pleasure to have you both here.
It's a pleasure to be with you, Gary. Thanks a lot.
First, I'd like to let my audience know your role as the Office of Secretary of State, your role.
Well, we're really the heartbeat of the business community. We're the maternity ward for business. You know, if you look at the economy as a three-legged stool, all three of those legs are in the Secretary of State's office. The first one is business development. People file their corporations, their LLCs, their nonprofits there. The second leg of the stool is lending. People have to have money to do whatever it is they're going to do to help make money, support their family, and get their business going. So banks file their security documents. You know, you borrow money and the bank wants you to pledge something. Well, if you pledge a piece of land, it gets put on the Register of Deeds record, and we consult with the Register of Deeds. But if you pledge on a motor vehicle that has a title, then the lien's there. But when you pledge everything else out there, from a herd of cows to a crop of timber that's been severed from the land, to inventory financing for furniture stores, car dealerships, appliance dealerships, all of this earth-moving equipment that you see around here, they don't have titles like a car. They're sold on a bill of sale. So the evidence of that loan, if it went for that crane or that earth mover or that bobcat or whatever it is, that documentation is filed with us. It could be computers, it could be machining equipment, it could be just anything. Then the third leg of the economy is for those people that don't want to borrow and have to pay back, they want investors. So we have a role with people register their investments with us if they're not, publicly traded on the stock exchange. And our job in that is to make sure that there's a there, that it's not a scam from the beginning. And we also register the people that sell things. Now that does involve publicly traded like the stock market. Every stockbroker that sells to any one single client in North Carolina has to be registered with us, whether they live in Montana or Michigan or wherever. Here's what we find. We find a lot of people love to come to North Carolina because it's simply a great place. Yes. They come here for education. They come here to play golf 365 days a year. They come here because our mountains are beautiful and our shores beautiful. They come here because their kids are here and their grandkids are here. I know the drill. But they've got a financial advisor from wherever they're coming from. And they like that relationship. They want to keep it. So when that couple moves to North Carolina, that financial advisor is going to have to register with us. And that's a uniform law. It's the same in all states. So while we may have upwards to 200,000 stockbrokers and advisors registered with us, they're not all physically located here in North Carolina. Part of my role is also consumer protection. So educating folks about investments, making sure that these salespeople are properly registered. And also, we can deny people a registry in North Carolina if they've been a bad actor in another state, if they've had some disciplinary action. We have that information. Those that have had criminal charges and come to North Carolina, but fail to tell us about those, there are a few people like that out there. It's our job to keep them, deny them the license. And then a couple times we've found that they don't pay much attention to what we do and they start selling stuff anyway. So we have to go the criminal route on a lot of those. I have law enforcement authority in a couple different areas that help protect consumers and protect businesses.
Now, this is a question. What is your perspective on the pandemic that we have going on now? How is your office responding to that?
Well, my office, beginning March 20th, we started telecommuting. We were not prepared to go to telecommuting, so I am quite proud of my employees keeping their morale up and everything. If somebody would have told me in January it would have been a good idea to have, 50, 100
Yes.
laptops on the shelf, I'd have looked at them and said, "You're nuts." I could have used 50, 100 laptops. So we had to go find some laptops. We had to do some different things because some people are coming in 2 days a week to do what they need to do on the computer and then working other stuff at home. So I'm so proud about how they've continued to serve. It has affected us a lot. It has also affected us in the volume of business that we are doing. And you're going to find some of these things I'm about to tell you that will knock your socks off. Some parts of our business portfolio have gone down. Other parts have absolutely exploded. And business creation is one of those things that has exploded, and lending has exploded.
Wow.
What we're seeing is that on those security documents, the lien documents that banks and other lenders file, we have already this year done over 18,000 more than we had done last year by June 30. 18,000 more. We're talking about at the end of the year, we could be 30,000 or more ahead. That's an awful lot of documents to be processing. On business incorporations, we have continued to see growth. I saw this in the trend lines in the first half of this year. For us, the state year begins on July 1. So the third and fourth quarter of 2019, we were seeing corporation growth go just like it had been doing during 18 and 19. And now it's continued to grow even after the pandemic. We are closed out the year. I've got so many numbers laying on my table here, I can't tell you. I've lost a few of them. But we are considerably up on forming new corporations, new nonprofits, and new LLCs. And most of that activity is in LLCs, limited liability companies.
And also, do you support funding for the existing businesses?
I absolutely support funding for existing businesses. What the federal government has done has been a patchwork. Some of the things they put a label on and said it was for small business, and it didn't exactly get to what you and I think are small businesses for a variety of reasons. We're seeing that companies that are stockholder owned and seem to have very, very good profits got in there and got some of that original PPE money. Not that they weren't entitled to it, but that first amount got zapped up real quickly. Then the government extended and added more to it with the goal of specifically getting it out to small businesses. But anytime the government changes the rules in the middle of something, people become apprehensive, and that's happened here. Some of the terms for forgiveness did not exactly work for some of the businesses. I mean, it sounded like a real sweetheart deal, but others found that it just wasn't going to work. They couldn't run their operation under the type of setting where you were in compliance with the executive orders, and then they added that they could pay bonuses to themselves, that kind of stuff. That irritated a lot of people. It's been a mixed bag. We definitely need to help our small businesses, our Main Street businesses, the mom and pops, the backbone of the community, all businesses. I don't want to be overly critical of the federal government. Their job was to get resources out there fast. And when you're deploying huge amounts of money, you need an infrastructure to support that. They kind of rushed into it. And, if they'd have had 6 weeks lead time before they let it out, I have every idea it could have been a much better program. The Small Business Administration is quite capable of, doing those kinds of things. The other big problem was that a lot of the neediest of the smaller businesses did not have relationships with the big banks, who were out there just, advancing money out there to their customers. The big banks had the financial data that they needed to promptly jump in with their regular customers, and the small businesses had to scramble. They didn't have that kind of strong banking relationship. They hadn't borrowed all that much money, in the past. And maybe didn't have the records quite up to snuff, and they needed to do that. And I will tell you that the fact that folks had not kept their records up with the state of North Carolina caused a lot of heartache in the beginning of this.
Okay, what we're going to do right here, we're going to take a break. I want you to hold that thought right there, Secretary. We're going to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to have more conversation with North Carolina Secretary of State and my commentary guest, Steve Rao. Don't touch that dial. We'll be right back after this.
We had people, I had personal calls. We had people calling the office, some of my other deputies, from companies whose names I will not tell you, but you would think because they have a whole raft of financial people in-house and had lawyers, CPAs, what have you, that they would get their paperwork on a regular basis in with the state of North Carolina. Because when they took their stuff to the banker and in the banker's due diligence process and called up that very first day and said, well, I'm sorry, you're not current active with the state of North Carolina. You've got to deal with the Secretary of State to get that done. Well, needless to say, people were so excited and anguished and stressed. You could tell it in their voice. People cried on the phone to me, and we got those people straightened out. I'm so proud of my Secretary of State staff. This happened around Easter time. We jumped in. There was no way we could whittle away at getting the increased demand, the backlog taken care of. We provided overtime, which we almost never do in state government for functions like this, on Easter weekend. And we cleared away 1,100 of those North Carolina corporations and LLCs who were in the process of getting money, but it was held up because they weren't current with us. So, and the reinstatement business has been happening on and on and on. Now, part of that is also because the Department of Revenue in early 2020 did a lot of revenue suspensions. When I looked at my graphs on that kind of stuff, there was a huge peak in the beginning of 2020, and nobody knew that, all the rest of this stuff was going to be following. So there were folks that had to get right with the Department of Revenue and then get right with us.
So what I'm hearing since the pandemic, it has actually revealed some people perhaps that weren't in compliance.
That is correct. That's correct.
Okay. Now, do you think that North Carolina businesses should remain closed?
That's a question with a very difficult answer. There is a lot that we don't know. Those businesses that require people to be close together to be profitable, those businesses where the likelihood of spreading the virus is very high. This is just my opinion, and I've barely been out of this house because I'm over a certain age. I don't know that I have any particular vulnerability, but I'm not taking any chances. I made a pledge to my husband at the beginning of this that I was not going to be bringing in any virus to our household, and he pledged the same to me. And we have abided by that. I've gone out very, very little, and he's done all the shopping and everything because he's more of a germaphobe than I am. So he's the one that should be going out.
I bet he enjoys it, though. I bet he enjoys it.
He does. He's very, very careful. So, we've seen that people have failed to take personal responsibility. And I wear a mask to protect me. I wear a mask to protect you. And we all need to be wearing masks to protect all of us as a community. None of us are guaranteed that we're not going to get it. And none of us know how seriously it will affect us. And none of us know if we give it to somebody else.
I agree with the secretary. I think it's there's a lot we don't know, but I think it's a major global health disaster. I mean, sometimes it's hard to think about the numbers. In the United States, 134,000 have died, over 2.5 million cases or more, over 500,000 in the world. And just this week, the new daily infections reached 60,000 on Tuesday. So wow. I think that this is not a time to be, I understand that businesses are hurting, but I think it's so critical that we get the virus down. And like Secretary Marshall said, the best way we can do that is wear our masks, because even if you're young and you think you're not going to get it, you could be carrying the virus and not even have the symptoms and give it to someone else. And so when you have protests or rallies or you're in large groups, you can just spread the virus. And so as economies have opened up, the virus has gone up. And so Governor Cooper and Secretary Cohen, I think, are doing a very good job of making data-driven decisions And I think as a follow-up insight, and that's one thing I'd like to ask Secretary is, it's interesting that businesses are increasing, which I found to be amazing, that new business, more people are filing for, incorporation in North Carolina. But what I'm hearing out there is businesses are having a hard time with money, resources. And I know the Secretary of State's office may have programs and resources during this hour. She could talk to us about crowdfunding is one, and I've been working with Wake County Commissioner Matt Calabria on putting together a program that we could maybe provide some money from Wake County to help businesses. So those are my thoughts, and I think that we just got to tread with caution.
Very good point. In reference to technology, do you think that the COVID virus, this whole situation, do you think it has actually helped technology, and has it begun to make people be more focused on it and more aware of it?
I think you're exactly right. I think it's brought more attention on the need for the widespread deployment of a level playing field with technology. I mean, some of my Secretary of State employees could not telework because they don't have the internet at their house. They don't have enough salary from some of our entry level positions to be able to afford the internet. And then some of them that have very, very spotty reception and weak internet connections. And so that is a barrier to being an effective teleworker. Same thing's true with the students. You got to have reliable, strong internet service for students to be able to do the research that they need to do their projects, to do their learning, what have you. And when you look about other parts of the economy, we've got agriculture that needs strong internet connections, but we got to have the infrastructure to do that. One of the long-range consequences after actions from the COVID, a lot of economists are predicting is that people are going to think differently about living in big cities because of the transportation and the spread through subways and bus and all that kind of stuff, and tight living together, and that people are going to want to leave the city and come to more less dense areas. Well, North Carolina's prime for that. We've got a lot of nice towns that have done Main Street programs. They don't look blighted at all. There's a lot of good opportunities in those places. And if you like the beach, you can be down there closer. We've got a lot of great places and a lot of great people with a good work ethic, but we just don't have the opportunities. So the state needs to help these areas have opportunities.
Steve Rao, the same question for you as far as technology. You think we have gained and got more awareness with technology since the virus has impacted us?
Absolutely. I mean, we're the third fastest growing tech economy in the United States, and that's data from North Carolina Technology Association. I'm in the tech industry in addition to my public role, and you're seeing tremendous increase in digital technologies, whether it's through Zoom, which we're using today, Skype, Microsoft Teams, and that's stimulating economic growth in those areas. The other thing I see myself, and even in Morrisville and Cary, I'm getting a lot of entrepreneurs coming there saying, I've developed for example, a Morrisville-based company, Field to Base, they've developed an application called Cooperate, which is basically an app that would be a boarding pass. So you get your temperature checked, you get all of that stuff, and you get like a boarding pass, like you're flying a plane, boarding a plane, and you'd be able to go back to work, and contact tracing. And so just as John Chambers, the former CEO of Cisco, said, disruption and where we are today could actually stimulate more entrepreneurs in the tech industry, and many of them would be in emerging areas like artificial intelligence, robotics, sensors, smart cities, and that could actually create many, many new jobs that we don't even have today. So it's going to be a good problem to have. How we train people for those jobs is another story. But I hope that we can use technology better, particularly data, so that the next time a pandemic hits or a hurricane hits, we're prepared for it. We know exactly where the hotspots are, where the disasters, and I think this is something that we need to talk to Governor Cooper about and the General Assembly about as we make those investments in North Carolina moving forward.
I want to ask the Secretary, do you support the purchase of guns and possession of guns right now? Do you support that?
Well, I support the Second Amendment, but there are some things out there that are eligible for purchase that I don't think should be. They're weapons of war. These mass repeating things, people say they're going deer hunting, pheasant hunting. My husband hunts, he doesn't take a repeating rifle, some high-powered thing that would blow everything out of a deer.
Yes,
You know,
I know exactly what you mean.
probably I could hit one with an AK-47, and I'm not a very good shot. So
Yeah.
and I understand that people are ammunition supplies and gun sales have gone out of the roof. But when I see armed people walk with these heavy duty, powerful things walking into the subway in downtown Raleigh of North Carolina, that's disturbing.
Secretary Elaine Marshall, I truly agree with you. It would be definitely disturbing. But listen, what we're going to do, we're going to take another break and we're going to be right back after this. Hello and welcome back to Get With The Program Radio Show. Again, I'm your host, Gary Jones. Today we join in the studio with Secretary of State Elaine Marshall and Steve Rao. Before we took the break, we was talking about the Second Amendment and possession of guns. So Steve Rao, what is your take on the Second Amendment?
I mean, I respect the Second Amendment, but I think it's a matter. I think when our country was founded, the Second Amendment was to prevent insurrection at a time when there wasn't a strong military. So I think we have to look at the times we live in, and it's not necessary for people to carry semi-automatic machine guns and go into like public places. So, I mean, that's just my opinion on it. I think we have to, deal with both the rights and the safety of our public.
Okay, I think this question will be for both of you. Do you think that the police brutality is a big problem today, and has it been previously?
As a practicing lawyer, one of the things that bothered me the most was not per se the brutality, I'll get to that, but the disparate treatment of certain people in the court system. It was partly the tone of their skin, it was partly their economic position. You would see people who would get very light or no sentences, and then other people with sentences that were very, very harsh. The bail system has caused a lot of family disruption and created a downward spiral when folks can't post, $300 to $500 cash bond, which for a lot of people's not much, but they sit in jail for weeks and weeks and weeks. They've lost their job. They've sometimes lost their family. They've certainly lost self-respect. They end up with, finally, a lot of them going in and begging to plead because the amount of time they would get for a guilty plea, they've already spent more time than that in the jail. That system is just grossly unfair and unjust. Mm-hmm. I have seen instances of police brutality. I have represented people who have been kneecapped with one of the patrolmen or one of those great big flashlights that was unnecessary. I certainly have seen police brutality on TV. And while it makes me sick to my stomach, I am glad a lot of people are seeing that because sometimes if someone is a suspect in a crime and they say that they've experienced this brutality simply because they're a suspect, they're not believed, or they're not believed because of the color of their skin. So having these horrible examples shown for the public, like George Floyd, really was an eye-opening experience to a lot of folks that are not familiar with some things that go on. And I think that's why you're seeing a tremendously diverse group of people, young, old, white, Asian, Latino, and African American, out there peacefully protesting the things that have gone on and that we've seen lately. I think I on the George Floyd weekend, I wrote down a list of things that I thought needed changing. Abolishing the chokehold is absolutely one of them. De-escalation training is clearly another one. Requiring the body cameras to be on all times or come on automatically is one. Mental health. I mean, how many times have I heard any different sheriffs say that they run the biggest mental health clinic at their jail, and they really are not providing any services. But mental health treatment for people and family assistance in this regard is something that we've not done a very good job of here in North Carolina. And I hope that, the funding will be directed so that we do have more community level assistance for people.
Secretary, do you support a pathway to citizenship for illegal immigrants?
Well, that depends. I think there should be pathways to citizenship. What some people call illegal immigrants, I would not call illegal immigrants. I think asylum seekers in particular need to have their cases heard. I think we clearly need a pathway for what we traditionally have called migrant workers. Our farmers and other groups need people to get their crops in the ground. They need to get their crops out of the ground. I think it's a complex answer, but we've got folks that are upstanding citizens that are contributing, that are paying taxes, that, on and on and on. And so many of them are afraid to violate the law. I mean, nobody intentionally goes out to violate the law, but they drive a little bit under the speed limit for fear of getting caught. The worst thing that can happen to them is that they are rear-ended by somebody else. And then in my experience, some of them tend to flee because, they don't want to deal with the police because they're fearful about what will happen in some way, whether it's a deportation or whether it's some other bias that comes out. So, we should make it easier for people to be law-abiding. We should pay attention to these asylum claims. We should not be separating families and children, on and on and on. There are just a lot of atrocities that have happened, but it's not a one-size-fits-all answer at all.
And as a follow-up question, just a quick follow-up, because I do a lot of stuff on immigration. One question I would have with the secretary is, we were in India together, and there's probably no elected official in the state that understands the international community, whether it's the Indian community, the Chinese community, the Elaine Marshall. So my question is, with the recent restrictions on H-1B immigration from the Trump administration, and also the making it harder for international students, does this concern you? Because you've seen this over 20 years, the impact of globalization. Like, for example, Mr. Chatterjee came from India to study at NC State, get an MBA. He started a business. He's influenced U.S.-India relations. His whole community is growing. That's just an example. What long-term impact would that have if we move away from even having international students come in North Carolina?
It will have a devastating impact. The students that come here see America as a place for opportunity. And I've traveled a lot in my later years here around the world, and I've learned there are very, 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 very smart people in other places. What they don't have in those other places is opportunity. And America is that place where opportunity abounds if you are willing to work hard to get a good education, and opportunity can be yours. If there's ever a thought that we need each other, this is a global pandemic. We need the scientists from around the world. We need the help from around the world to keep it contained. That's already out of the box, but we should have had that. It takes global cooperation. When I think about the last Nobel Peace Prize that was awarded to somebody in North Carolina, they are a Turkish immigrant. When I think about the drug Taxol, the most commonly utilized breast cancer drug, Dr. Bueno is right here, did it at NC State along with another collaborator, and is living in Durham. When I think of the contributions, Dr. Narayan, he's got probably 100 plus patents to his name. These people they've added so much to this country. When I see on TV the doctors that are serving in the emergency rooms and the medical care people, it hasn't passed me by that a lot of these people have names and looks about them that you clearly understand that they are international people that have come here. They are our doctors, they are our scientists, our technology people. Sergeant Brin is an immigrant. All these people that have added so much to the economy of America and North Carolina.
That's a good answer. Now, if we don't find a cure for the COVID virus within 6 months, where do you see North Carolina small and large businesses moving forward economically?
Well, obviously, a virus is a preventative measure that we may not get in 6 months, but that is the ACE card, if you will. That's the gold standard of what we would be looking for. Then next are these treatment medications, Remdesivir and some of these others. But what's beautiful to me is that we're finding some things that we already have that are now being tested that are known not to be harmful to people. We know maybe not exactly the dosage for the new treatment thing. I'm very impressed with the improvements in treatments. I really am. Obviously, you would rather prevent the illness than have to go into the treatment processes. But if we can tamp down the severity and the damage, the physical damage to people, that will become evident. And
Secretary of State Elaine Marshall, what we're going to do, we're going to hold that thought right there. We're going to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to talk more with North Carolina Secretary of State Elaine Marshall. Also joined with us today is Steve Rao. Don't touch that dial. We'll be right back after this. Hello and welcome back to Get With The Program radio show. Again, I'm your host, Gary Jones, and today we're joined in the studio with North Carolina Secretary of State Elaine Marshall and my friend Steve Rao. Before we took the break, Secretary, I want to ask you, in reference to business and confidence and opening back up, what is your take on that?
Business is not just having the business open. It is the public having the confidence to get out of their house and go into that business and trade with it and engage with it in a transaction or in a face-to-face service transaction, such as a massage and physical workouts and just whatever people do face-to-face. The public's got to have confidence in it. And I think having treatments that have proven to be very good is it's the second alternative. I mean, the first is a vaccine, but if we can improve the treatments, then people will, I think, gradually develop that, this is going to be the new normal, but we do have good treatments for it.
Steve, you want to piggyback on that?
No, I mean, I think, first of all, I think we have to do exactly what she said. If we can't find an immediate cure, things that we can do to reduce the symptoms of the disease, continue to wear a mask, wash our hands, be aware of that. And I think also being aware of what I call a post-COVID economy. So there's just so many things that are changing. How are we going to send our kids to school? Are people going to be going back into the offices as much as they did with Facebook and Google and all these big companies saying you don't have to go to work anymore? What's going to happen to cities, not only in the United States or North Carolina, but around the world? Are they going to go to more rural areas? There's so many moving parts of this thing that the world will never be the same, even if we come up with a vaccine. And I think that's the challenge we all face together. It's going to affect policymakers, elected officials, city leaders, leaders of nonprofits, our healthcare institution. I mean, look at Blue Cross Blue Shield. They're saying that just in the last 4 months, this pandemic has cost them $600 million. Blue Cross Blue Shield of North Carolina. Unbelievable, right? But I think we'll get through it because I am an optimist. And I think that when we put our heads together as Americans, we can solve this. We are leaders in the world. We will come together. And this is our Pearl Harbor moment. We are in a state of war right now. It's an economic war. It's a healthcare war. But the way wars are won is by being heroes and doing what we can to get through it. And the thing is that we just know that this is the way we're going to have to do it for a while, right? So
Now, we noticed downtown Raleigh and in other cities across the state, a lot of businesses are closed. You see wood and boards up to the windows, to the doors, and a lot of people are out of jobs. Secretary, how do you see us jumpstarting this thing when if they were to find a cure now? How do we jumpstart this economic downfall?
I don't have a crystal ball enough to know even what a jumpstart means. I think everything in this is a gradual process. Jumpstarting would be infusions of resources from either the state or the federal government. I'd rather them sustain.
What do you think?
Mike, I would actually come back with a question to the secretary, but I think it's just about we have to get very innovative of funding resources and for our businesses to continue to grow. So if more companies are forming, like she said in North Carolina, then I think one thing we have to do is how do we get that venture capital and that investment capital into the hands of businesses not only the restaurants, but the startups, these companies that are creating the jobs. One way of doing that is crowdfunding. The Secretary of State's office through the NC PACES Act has crowdfunding. So I'll just throw that out there, Secretary. I think that there may be an opportunity to have a crowdfunding where the community would raise money for these businesses, which I think would help us see these businesses open and thriving and doing well, which is what we all want to see.
And I do have news in the crowdfunding area. The crowdfunding PACES Act that Steve mentioned has two parts. One is for smaller entities to raise up to $250,000, and that sunsetted at the end of June. But we got it in one of the last measures that the General Assembly did in the last few days was to extend that, so it now has a 5-year additional lifespan. This is where folks don't have to do a whole lot of prospectus and accounting portfolios to offer to investors like you do in a very sophisticated offering. They can go to, if they're the pizza shop or the bakery, they can put it on the carryout packages, make an investment prospectus that way, an offering, and have their customers become shareholders in their organization. So $250,000 for some organizations would be a heck of a lot of money. Then the next step, the larger group, it does require more paperwork, but it doesn't require an audited financial report, which is pretty expensive for a lot of people. So the offering, the project has to be vetted by my staff, and that's only a matter of making sure that there's a there. Our job is to make sure that it's not a bogus scam thing from the beginning. So it's a pretty simple process. People just bring a little bit of paperwork in and they come and sit down with my staff. And then there's some rules to it. If you say you're going to raise, say, $1 million, you can't spend the first money that comes in to try to raise more, because that's a Ponzi scheme. There has to be an escrow agent that has to be with a certified person. Some attorneys are willing to be the escrow agent because they have escrow accounts. There's a company or two that is aggressively seeking to be escrow agents and have an internet platform where you can subscribe with them and promote it over the internet for this investment opportunity. It's a good, I always like, if you're giving charitable dollars, to give where you can see the good work. And I think put investing dollars where you can see what's going to happen, your street corner market or whatever they need to get back in business. If you want to continue to trade there, you may be willing to make an investment of $1,000 or $2,000 or something for a small piece of the action. I don't know that you're going to get wealthy with that kind of investing, but to have let's say it is a deli close in your neighborhood, it's important to have some place where your kids can walk to get stuff, where grandma doesn't need to get her car out to get to the grocery store, or
Right.
You're actually dealing with the butcher or the people doing the produce, that kind of stuff, rather than some big institutional activity. And it makes you feel good because you're investing in your community, not just the business. You're investing in that community because of the value that little small business can give to the community.
Now, once we know the businesses are all beginning to open back up, eventually it will.
Yeah.
Is there a system in place to make sure that all of the loans and the lending is distributed equally? Is there a system in place to watch all this? Because we know there's perhaps could be some fraudulent situations going on, but is something in place for that?
The Small Business Administration is charged with that, and the federal government has said with their loans they will be looking for, because there's reporting requirements and all those kinds of things. There's nothing that the Secretary of State would have to do with that, but there is some monitoring, because they're very aware that there are scam artists out there who probably applied for some of the loans and probably got some of the loans. So that the federal has that in their portfolio.
Well, I tell you what, Steve, I am good. Secretary, once again, thank you so much for being with us today. I know you're busy. I keep a good watch on you because you're all over the state, which is a good
I
thing.
know.
And,
Well, I used to be all over the state. Now I'm just all over the internet.
you're doing a wonderful job, though.
Thank
Yes,
you.
you're doing a
Yeah, she
wonderful
really
job.
is. Well,
Thank you,
thank
Gary.
you. I just
Yes.
want to thank her for being with us today. And I usually do the commentary with Gary, but I think we're just, I'll close out with the fact that we're just living in very uncertain times, and we literally are taking it one day, 1 hour at a time. But try to be positive, and we'll figure out a way to get through this.
Yes, we're
And
going to get through it. Yes.
we're going to get through it, and we'll look back and say that it made us stronger. And just to be, the thing I'm concerned of is that anywhere around the country, there's somebody that's lost a loved one, one less seat at the table, whether it's someone that lost their line of duty as a police officer, a healthcare worker, a loved one through this virus. And we just have to pray that they have the strength and that we can carry on. And so, Secretary, thank you for being with us today, and tell
Absolutely.
Tommy we said hi, and look forward to seeing you in person
Well,
soon, hopefully.
I want to reiterate what you're saying. I mean, you can't hug a nurse and you can't hug a first responder.
That's right.
And in our heart, and that's what we need to do. We need to support them, and the emergency room people. I always knew they were special people in a special place, but man, oh man, everybody knows it now.
Yeah, they're overwhelmed and they are stepping up. They are.
They are. They are.
I'd like to thank you for listening to Get With the Program, and I'd like to thank also North Carolina Secretary of State Elaine Marshall, and also I'd like to thank Steve Ralph for being here today. And we had a wonderful show, and look forward to bringing you back, Secretary. Also, I'd like to say thank you for listening. Always remember, keep your head up, stay positive, and remember to
Get with the program.
What you talking about?
The program. The program. Get with the program.
Everybody clap to this. Say what?
Get with the program.
It starts now.